Hello, everyone. Welcome to this presentation on the BC Arts Council's Early Career Development Program. We will be talking specifically about the application process for individual artists applying for either a mentorship or a residency project. We at the BC Arts Council carry out our work on the land of Indigenous nations throughout what is colonially known as British Columbia, and we're grateful for the continuing relationships with Indigenous people in BC that developed through our work together. We offer gratitude to the Lekwungen people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, on whose ancestral lands we operate our main offices and where Michelle and I are recording this video from today. My name is Erin Macklem. I'm a program advisor at the BC Arts Council, and I am joined by my fellow program advisor, Michelle Benjamin. Together, we co-facilitate the Early Career Development Program, with Michelle taking responsibilities for the studio arts disciplines, such as visual and media arts, literary arts, as well as museums and cultural centers. And I take responsibility for the performing arts disciplines, including dance, theater, music, comedy, circus, and interdisciplinary performing arts. But really, we work together very closely on this entire program and intake, and we're happy to advise you or redirect you to the appropriate person. This presentation will go through the Early Career Development Program application form section by section and provide guidance on what we're asking you to share about your project, how questions relate to the assessment criteria, and how to address that criteria in your responses to these questions. If you don't have this already, it might be useful for you to have a copy of the program guidelines handy. You can download those from the program page for the Early Career Development Program on our website. You can also download an application preview. This is a Microsoft Word document that will work with a screen reader. For an overview of the BC Arts Council, our strategic plan, the guidelines for the Early Career Development Program, and some grant writing tips, you can watch our other pre-recorded presentation available on our website on the Early Career Development page. If you have additional questions, please contact either one of us via email, and we will be happy to help you sort through the application. So the Early Career Development application intake closes on Friday, June 30th at 11:59 p.m. At midnight, you will no longer be able to submit your application. We suggest that you submit your application in advance of that, though, as after 5 p.m. our offices close and we won't be available to support any last-minute technical issues that might arise. If you've not already registered in our online system, you should do that as soon as you've finished watching this presentation. The Early Career Development Program is open to individual and organizational applicants, but today we'll only be discussing the components that are open to individual artists in this presentation. You will find a complete application preview in Microsoft Word on the program page on our website. It's a useful document to use as you start to prepare your application, and it's designed specifically to work with screen readers. This allows you to work offline on your answers and then copy and paste them into the application form.
We're going to launch right into a review of the application questions for this program. So the application is organized into 8 tabs, the ones that you see here on the screen. The questions in the tabs correspond generally with the assessment criteria as outlined on pages 8 and 9 of the program guidelines. So here are some general tips that will be helpful as you start to answer the questions. First, pay attention to the word counts. This indicates the maximum allowable words. You do not have to write the maximum number of words. Use as many words as you need to express your idea or to answer the question up to the maximum. If you are working in the application preview, you should be aware that the way Microsoft Word counts words may not be exactly the same as how our online system counts the words. So it's a good idea to paste your responses into the online system early to avoid having to make last-minute edits. We recommend that you use short, clear sentences or even point form, as long as you provide answers that are fully responding to each question. The assessors are not marking you on your grammar, but they do need clear information. It's also important to remember that assessors may not be familiar with your work, specific practices, communities, or cultures. We use artists from a range of disciplines in this program, so be sure to provide the information they need to understand your project. Avoid or explain specialized or technical terms, academic language, or expressions that may be difficult to understand. Some examples might be somatic practice or land-based, polyphonic, verbing. If it's important to your application to use specialized terms, include a brief definition or description of their meaning. When you see an asterisk next to a question in the online system, this indicates that that question is mandatory. The system will not let you submit your application until you have added an answer to that question. So we'll start with the Profile Details tab. This is the first tab in the application. So this is system generated content. So you just need to look it over and make sure it's all correct. If the information is not correct, go to your personal profile and update it before completing the application. To access your personal profile, you click Home, the top right of your screen, and from your home page, click Personal Profile, the little crowd icon. Any changes to your address information must be submitted via email to bcartscouncil@gov.bc.ca. I'll also mention here that it's a good idea to complete or at least review the Designated Priority Group tab and the Voluntary Self-ID form in your online profile. Designated priority groups may qualify for strategic investment funding or prioritization of funding. So if you identify as a member of a designated priority group and would like to be considered for these strategic measures, you will want to go into your profile and update those pieces. This is also a good time to mention that any specific identity factors noted on your system profile, for example, in the designated priority group or the voluntary self-ID form, are not provided to assessors. So if identity factors are important considerations or context for your artistic practice, consider referencing them within your application responses. For example, if you identify as Indigenous and that is an important part of the project you are applying for, you may want to self-identify in your profile statement in the application. Same if you identify as having a disability or if you are a person of color.
Now let's talk about the Applicant Details tab. This is the next tab over on the right. The first questions: what is the applicant's primary field of practice? This is used to identify what you do and to provide context to your application for the assessors. This information guides us as we assign your application to a specific assessment group. You'll have to check a box to confirm that you're a BC resident. This is used to determine eligibility for the program. You have to have been residing in BC for at least 12 months prior to applying. You're allowed to travel from BC, but you must have an address in BC and file taxes here to be eligible. Finally, we want to know if you're applying only for yourself or if this is a collaborative project. For example, if you and one or two more colleagues want to work together with a single mentor. If you're planning to apply as a collaborative project, we ask that you contact me or Michelle to discuss your project before you write or submit your application. Next, we'll talk about the Project Information tab. This tab includes most of the key questions in the application, and this is where you will upload some important documents. Once you get past the first section of basic project information, you'll see that the questions are organized into 3 distinct sections that each correspond with the assessment criteria in the program guidelines. Those criteria are impact on the early career practitioner, that would be you, and then impact on the arts sector and community. And the last one is feasibility. This criteria is broken down in detail in the guidelines, and that is your primary guide as you complete the application. Every question is designed to respond to the assessment criteria and to give the assessors the information they need to determine the merit and impact of your project. The first section includes some basic information that will allow us, Michelle and I, and the assessors to understand the focus of your application. The first question is, which component are you applying for? So here you'll select either mentorship or residency. And it's a good idea to answer this question right away in your application process, as your selection here determines the kind of questions that will appear for you later in the application. If you have not selected one of the 2 answers, you'll likely run into some gaps in your application later on. Next is the amount requested. Be sure that the amount requested that you enter here matches the amount in your expense form. Double check that before you submit your application. Next is project start and end dates. Make sure your project doesn't start before June 30th, 2023. Next is duration in weeks. This must be at least 8 weeks and no more than 52 weeks. Then we have location of project. This is where the project is taking place. And then describe your project in 1 to 2 brief sentences. This is an important piece as it helps to inform the initial eligibility review for your project and also helps to remind the assessors about your project, especially after they've been reviewing 40 or 50 other applications. So be clear and concise here. Refer to your project and your practice and any other important details that you can fit into the short space allowed. For example, a 6-month mentorship in writing fiction with Alice Walker, or a 1-year dance residency in Singapore, where I will be mentored by the head choreographer.
So before we start to talk about the rest of the questions in the application, we want to review the assessment criteria in the program guidelines. As we've said, the questions are organized into 3 distinct sections that each correspond with the assessment criteria that you'll see in the guidelines. This criteria is broken down in detail, and it's your primary guide as you complete the application. In the Extending Foundations Action Plan, the BC Arts Council committed to placing reconciliation, equity, diversity, inclusion, and access at the center of its activities, with the intention to address historic funding inequities. Equity considerations are embedded throughout the assessment criteria and the assessment process. So we'll go through each area of assessment and then the related questions. What you see on the screen is the exact assessment criteria from the guidelines, but we'll go through each bullet and offer some brief context to help explain what they mean. You should notice too that the sections are weighted differently, and this reflects the priorities of the program. The first area of assessment, impact on the early career practitioner, is weighted at 50% of the overall scoring, and so your responses to the questions in this area should reflect this priority. Here's the assessment criteria. When considering the impacts of the project on the early career practitioner, the assessment panel will assess the impact on the early career practitioner's artistic or professional practice. How is this activity going to take you, your practice, and your career to the next level? The next is significance and depth of knowledge transfer and learning. Is this a small step in your skill development, career growth, and learning, or is this a giant leap? Is this specialized knowledge transfer that can only be gained by spending time doing this activity under these circumstances, or is this something you could look up on YouTube? The next is opportunities for the early career practitioner's professional growth and the development of the next stage of their career. The next is the timeliness, urgency, and relevance of the activities in relation to the early career practitioner's learning or career development goals. And finally, the suitability of the mentor and the host organization relative to the early career practitioner's experience and learning goals. Now we'll move into the section that corresponds with the impact on the early career practitioner area of the assessment criteria. The first is basic training information. This is a table in which we ask you to provide your most recent relevant training or education. So this table has columns to complete for each entry. So first, the early career practitioner's name. That's pretty straightforward. That's you. And then the kind of training, for example, an apprenticeship or an undergraduate degree or traditional knowledge transfer. Next is the focus of the training or the name of the program. Next is the name of the institution or the traditional knowledge keeper or mentor. And then finally, the month and year that that training was completed. Next, we ask for a summary of any other relevant training. And the key here is relevant. If you're applying for a mentorship in visual arts, it might not be relevant to include your dance training. Next question is asking you to describe up to 3 recent career or training highlights indicating their relevance to the proposed project. So some examples here include significant projects, awards, exceptional opportunities. So this question helps the assessors to determine what level you are working at, as well as your capacity to take on and complete their project that you are applying for. It will also help them to assess the impact of this learning opportunity on you and your practice. So this next question is probably the most important part of this application. This is where we ask you for a statement or more of a story about the early career practitioner, that's you, and this project. So the question is, upload a biographical statement prepared by each early career practitioner, briefly addressing the questions below. The first, Describe your current practice. You will talk about how this opportunity will have an impact on your artistic and your professional practice. What will you learn? We ask you to be specific. For example, don't just say, I want to become a better painter. That's pretty vague. Instead, say something like, I want to learn how to create texture and develop a more diverse color palette with conventional hues and paints. I want to improve the depth of my representations and my ability to deliver realistic representations through nuanced coloring. Another example might be, I'm going to improve my knowledge of lighting systems. It's not clear what you're actually learning. Instead, how about, I will learn to work with a variety of new models of lighting fixtures, including the Source 9000 modern AI-supported lights and moving systems that contain mini projectors, allowing me to map projections in significantly more complex ways and on surfaces that are moving in tandem with the lights. That's much more compelling and informative for the assessors. The next two questions, how will that impact be measured? So how will you know that you have achieved your learning goals? And then how will this project have an impact on the potential for future opportunities and your long-term career trajectory? Here is where we want you to inspire the assessors with your vision of how your career might unfold. What will be the specific impact of this project on you and your learning objectives? What will success look like for you? Allow the assessors to imagine how these new skills will benefit your work and enhance your ability to develop your practice and career opportunities in the long term. Where do you see these skills taking you? Next is, why is this the right time for you to engage in this activity? Here we want to talk about any number of relevant pieces to do with the timing of this project. Why is this the right time in terms of your practice or career, or your life outside of your practice, or at this moment in the world? Maybe the opportunity to work with this specific mentor is only available in a very narrow time frame. Talk about all of the relevant factors to do with timing of this project. Next is, what artistic, cultural, geographic, or other communities do you engage with, and how will this project have an impact on these communities? This is where we want you to talk about the overall context for your work. Are you engaged with a specific community of artists who share your practice? If yes, how will your experience impact or benefit that community? Do you practice an art form that is very specific to your cultural community? For example, Chinese opera or Haida carving. Will the impact of your project spread into that community? Do you live in a small town in northern BC? Will you carry your learning into that geographic community in some significant way? We want you to think about these things as you dream about and map out your project. You're able to submit this biographical statement in a variety of formats, although you must choose only one. You can submit a written, maximum 2-page PDF document, or you can submit in audio or ASL formats. The specific instructions and restrictions on these options are visible in the application and the application preview. You should review them carefully before launching into one process or the other.
This next set of questions are specifically about mentorships and will only appear when you've selected the mentorship option. So the name of the mentor, and if more than one mentor is being proposed, provide the name of the primary mentor. And then details of the mentorship project addressing the following: rationale for the selection of the mentor, alignment of the mentor's expertise and experience with the applicant's desired learning and career development. So with these questions, what is it about this mentor and their work that excites and inspires you? You've already talked about your learning goals and your long-term career and practice objectives. This is where you explain how and why this mentor will help you achieve those goals and reach those objectives. Next, we asked you to describe the structure and format of the mentorship. So here you can talk about, what is the relationship and interaction with your mentor? What will that look like? How often will you meet? Where will you meet? In person, online, at their studio, in what city? Next, we offer an opportunity to provide a website or link to your mentor's work if available. If your mentor has a website, add the URL here to provide additional information to the assessors. It's totally okay if your mentor doesn't have one. These questions that I'll go over next are specifically about residencies, and these will only appear when you've selected the residency option. So first, there's some basic information, the name of the organization hosting the residency, the name of the residency program, if it has one, the location of the residency. If the host organization has a website, you can enter it there. And then we get into the juicy bits of information about your residency. So discuss the residency addressing the following. What is the mandate of the organization hosting the residency? Who are the artists and communities served? And here you can speak to some of the considerations of, is this all about a specific practice or discipline? Who attends their residencies and how might you benefit from time with the other participants? What is this organization and this residency's specific approach to skill development that aligns with your career goals and your learning objectives? You'll be asked to address the structure and format of the residency. So what will your days look like? When will you be engaged with mentors or instructors? And when will you be practicing or applying the knowledge that you've gained? We ask for the names of mentors or instructors and details of the learning, skill sharing, and knowledge transfer opportunities, and the rationale for your selection of this residency. So this is where you can make it clear why this specific residency is important to you, your goals, and your practice. Who are the instructors, and what can they teach you? Is there something about the specific facility that's relevant or exciting, or about the location? What can you tell the assessors about this residency that will make it clear to them how important this residency is for you? So moving into the next area of assessment, this is called impact on the community and the arts sector, which is weighted at 30% of the overall scoring. You can think about this section as zooming out or taking a wide angle view of your practice and your project that you're proposing. You are part of the arts and culture sector, and you intersect with different communities. Some examples might be your geographic community where you're located, or your community of practice, the discipline or art form that you work in, or your cultural community, or your community of peers, and so on. There are many different aspects you can consider when thinking about your relationship to the sector and to your community, and it's up to you to define those for yourself. In the context of this grant, we're asking you to situate and articulate your relationship to your various communities as appropriate, and to speak to how your practice and this project will intersect with and have impact on those communities. We recognize that not all of these points are going to be relevant to every project, but we encourage all applicants to reflect on the criteria and really consider if these criteria are somehow reflected in the project. So when considering the project's impacts on the early career practitioners' identified communities and the BC arts and culture sector more broadly, the assessment panel will consider any opportunities for reclamation, preservation, or innovation of the art form or practice. Does the project make a meaningful contribution to the practices of equity-deserving arts practitioners and cultural communities? Has thought been given to the integrity of the project, including ethical approaches to research, collaborative processes, source materials, cultural considerations, and protocols? Has consideration been given to engagement with Indigenous people, communities, practices, materials, and beliefs? And then what is the timeliness, urgency, and relevance of your activities in relation to any identified needs within the sector? This area of assessment continues on to the next slide here with these last 3 bullet points. So assessors will also be considering if the project makes a contribution to rural and remote communities, if it will also have an impact on or provide benefit to your mentor or mentors, and is there any opportunities for reciprocal learning? So what skills, knowledge, perspectives, or experience might you be sharing with your mentor? And then finally, if thought has been given to accessibility in this project. This could be things like accessibility of physical spaces, financial accessibility, or supports for those who experience barriers or disability.
So the answers to these next questions should respond to the impact on the community and arts sector section of the assessment criteria. The assessors want to know if through engaging in this learning activity, you will not only be receiving personal and professional impact, but that your artistic and other communities will also benefit. But does your activity represent any or all of these things in some way? This is your chance to connect your learning activity to these big topics. So how might this project contribute to the art form or practice, including reclamation, preservation, or innovation? So talk about your specific art form or practice, and if it's relevant to the project, how will this work help to build, enhance, and develop your artistic community? Will it help to bring back a lost art form or preserve one that is at risk of being lost? Is it exploring new or innovative approaches that will influence your peers or colleagues? Next question is, how will this activity have an impact on your community or communities? This could mean any or all of your artistic, cultural, geographic, or other communities. And consider both immediate and long-term impacts. So does this opportunity somehow lay out a pathway or provide a vehicle for other parts of your community or your circles? Does it improve future conditions in your field or for other similar practitioners or people? Artists that we've worked with said, when you kick open the door of opportunity, you should hold it open for others. Does your project reflect this thinking? So continuing in the project information tab, the next question is, does this project address an identified need in the sector? And if it does, describe that need and how the project will address it. So we know that there are needs in the sector, but sometimes it is hard, particularly in a cross-disciplinary panel, to understand what those needs really are. So if you know that the sector is in need of the training or access to skills that you are learning, let the assessors know that. For example, are theater companies having trouble finding light techs? Will this training enhance your capacity and skills as a light technician so that you can respond to some of the identified need? Does everyone have these skills you're learning, or are you filling a niche? And just to clarify, it doesn't have to be a need in the sector. Professional development will support your practice development. And it is okay to say no to this question if you think it is a need in your practice, but not necessarily for everyone or for the sector. So continuing on the project information tab and in the impact on the community and art sector question, the work that you do is important, and the way that you do that work is also important. The assessors want to know that you are approaching your practice and your project with integrity, being careful to do no harm, and being mindful of things like cultural appropriation. The specific points they'll consider to evaluate the integrity of the project include examining if your plans include ethical approaches to research, collaborative processes, contributors, source materials, cultural considerations, and protocols. Also, engagement with Indigenous people, communities, practice, materials, and beliefs, and meaningful contribution to equity deserving and underrepresented artistic practices, arts practitioners, and cultural communities. So these following questions specifically address these ethical approaches. So first, is your work influenced by, or does it involve or reflect cultures or communities outside of your own? And if yes, describe the steps taken to respectfully reflect and collaborate with these communities and integrate an equitable and ethical approach in your work. The next question is, does your project engage with First Nations, Métis, or Inuit peoples, communities, or content? And if yes, provide context to your relationship and describe plans to ensure a respectful, ethical, and culturally safe engagement. BC Arts Council recognizes the systemic racism and colonialism that have had far-reaching negative impacts on many marginalized and equity-seeking communities. If your project intersects with communities that are not your own, the assessors would like to know what knowledge or connection you already have to that community or communities, and if you can do your work with them without perpetuating historic harms. And in fact, will this project positively contribute to that equity-seeking community in some way? If yes, the assessors want to know. So, for example, you're studying ancient Japanese painting techniques, working with an elder expert in the field. Are there any protocols you need to follow? Or are you learning a specific singing technique that has religious connotations from a country that you have never been to? How will you respectfully engage in that learning activity? Do you know anything about the context of the practice? And if not, how will you find out? Also, if you're learning a Western European approach from someone who is not Western European, you can still indicate how you may support a racialized practitioner in their work. And again, this may not apply to your work at all. For example, if you were learning how to write music in your ancestral language from a speaker from your own culture, if it's your community, it's okay to say no to this question. But before you automatically say no, take time to reflect. It may be relevant. So we're continuing with the project information tab. The next question is, describe any accessibility challenges your project may present and how you plan to address them. Consider physical spaces, affordability, and support for those who experience barriers or disability. So how do you plan to address those challenges and remove barriers to access? So further to these ethical approaches, we ask you to consider the accessibility of your project and to let the assessors know of any foresight, consideration, or plans related to barriers or supports in your project. Are there any accessibility concerns that might be identified in the learning activities that you have planned? If so, how are you going to address them? This could be for yourself or for your mentor, or even for the skills or knowledge you plan to learn, where you will learn it, physical spaces, financial implications, or any assistive technologies you may need to plan for. So again, before you answer no to this question, just consider if there are any accessibility needs that you may not have thought of.
So now we'll move into the final section of the assessment criteria, which is feasibility. And this area is weighted at 20% of the overall scoring. So when considering the viability of your project, the assessment panel will assess the clarity of the work plan or timeline and appropriateness of the timeline to the learning outcomes, the clarity and appropriateness of the budget, including fair compensation for all participants, your experience and capacity to undertake the project, the experience and capacity of the mentors and the host organization to undertake or support the project, measures in place to ensure a culturally, emotionally, and physically safe environment for all participants, and the rigor of human resource practices and policies in relation to providing fair remuneration, equitable employment, and a safe and respectful work environment. Although I believe this question only appears in applications from organizations, if I'm not mistaken, and we've just accidentally left it into this presentation. So you probably don't have to worry about that question. So speaking to the feasibility section of the project information tab, the answers to these questions should respond to the feasibility section in the assessment criteria in the program guidelines. First question is, what is the work plan, timeline, or schedule? Include milestones, benchmarks, and/or specific dates and times. So the timeline you present should match with your description of the learning activities. You can include goals and milestones, such as major parts completed. This also gives a sense of how much time you'll be spending on the activities and should match your request for subsistence. Sometimes learning goals and activities can seem lofty or unachievable to assessors. This is an opportunity to show the assessors how you plan to do it all and how you can really bring this project to life. It can also help illuminate what you will need to accomplish. It can also help to illuminate what you will need to accomplish what you've set out to do and inform your expenses. So for example, you might say September 2023, main activity, where it's taking place, who's involved, like your mentor, your teacher, you, your partners, etc. You might say then in October 2023, this is the other next thing that we're doing where it's taking place and who is involved, and so on. You can set up your timeline relative to the length of your project, month by month, if it's a longer project, week by week, if it's a shorter one. Continuing on with the feasibility tab, the application asks, will artists, arts and cultural practitioners and technicians involved with this project be paid in alignment with industry standards within the field of practice? For example, according to CARFAC, please select yes, no, or not applicable. And if yes, explain how fair compensation will be determined within the project and/or the community context. And then you have an opportunity to explain how you arrived at that payment. The next question is, will elders and/or traditional knowledge keepers involved with this project be compensated fairly according to community context? Then you can select yes, no, or not applicable. And if yes, you can explain how the compensation level was determined. These are two more yes/no questions that relate to feasibility, particularly on how you've determined the fees you're paying people. So if you're not paying anyone individually, for example, you have just paid a registration fee for a course or for your residency, you can say it's not applicable or no to this question, and that's okay. However, if you've made an agreement with a mentor or a teacher, tell the assessors how you came up with the amount. In some cases, it can be simple, like the teacher charges $60 an hour as their standard rate. Or in other cases, it can be more complex. So let them know how you determined this fee so they know it's fair and has been discussed and agreed upon in advance. This should also match any confirmation you have included from your mentor in the support material. In particular for elders or knowledge keepers, there's no standard amounts to reference. What the assessors want to know is that you've discussed this amount or that you're basing it on something that you know, that it's not just an add-on amount. Continuing with the feasibility section, does your project present any risk to physical safety for yourself or those with whom you're planning to engage? And if yes, how do you plan to ensure safety, or what qualifications did you, your mentors, or your hosts have to ensure safety standards are maintained? Next question is, does your project involve emotionally sensitive or traumatic material? And if yes, what supports are in place to ensure emotional and mental well-being? And next, describe measures you have in place to ensure a culturally safe environment for all participants. Again, these are yes/no questions that are geared to specific applications. They may not apply to you. However, we hope that you will consider the physical, emotional, and mental safety of the work that you're doing on both yourself and those that you're working with. These questions come up at the assessment table, and they want to understand your perspective on these things.
So we'll move on to the budget tab that includes the expense summary form. So this is a pop-up form that you'll open. All applicants must complete the expense summary. The maximum request for this program is $30,000, and you should only include expenses in your form for which you are requesting support. It is not necessary to complete each line. You can leave an expense field blank as appropriate. And it's always a good idea to provide notes for each included expense. This is an area where more detail for the assessors is always helpful. So I'll go through the 5 areas of eligible expenses. The first is subsistence. So this is a maximum of $500 per week, and that can be prorated for part-time activities. So this is what it costs you to live, to pay your rent or mortgage, buy food, or take the bus as you are engaged in your professional development activity. The second is travel and related expenses, so accommodation or meals for any activities outside of your region. Travel expenses may be for yourself or for a mentor or advisor. The maximum meal per diem is $65 per day. And again, the expense details really should be provided in the notes section. The next is supplies, for example, consumable supplies, things that you're going to use up over the course of this project, or also things like equipment rental or reference material. This does not include capital expenses. These are not eligible. So something like the purchase of a computer or sound equipment. You can't buy them, but you can rent them. The next is eligible fees or honoraria for example, for mentors or for your residency fee. So for mentorship projects, we leave it to you to determine a reasonable and acceptable fee. And the letter from the mentor that you provide should make a clear reference to the financial and time arrangements you've made. You can also add childcare in here if you need it. Just make sure you put it in the notes. The next is production, exhibition, program, rehearsal space, and venue rental, if it's directly relevant to your learning project. Should know that the expense form will automatically add up the total of your expenses. And as Erin mentioned earlier, it's a good idea to make sure that the total at the bottom of your expense form matches the total request on that project information tab. So next we'll talk about the support material tab. So all uploaded documents should be PDF files. They should be easy to read. Assessors are looking at hundreds of documents. Making their job easier should be one of your goals. So we ask you to provide 2 signed letters of reference from established professionals in your discipline, commenting on the value of the residency or the mentorship and its potential impact on your professional and career development. These letters should be from someone who is familiar with you and your training, your practice, and your long-term career aspirations. The letter should include your name and refer to this program, to the Early Career Development Program. If you are applying for a collaboration, then each person applying should provide 2 letters of reference. So next is support material for residency projects only. If you're applying for a residency, we ask you to provide a letter or other document of confirmation from the host organization, and that should include a short description of the opportunities, resources, and supports that the residency will offer you, and a confirmation of the fees and expenses. You'll notice that there's no place to put samples of your work in this application. The quality of your work is not being assessed, and any additional support materials that you provide will not be viewed by the assessors. So this application is assessed based on the responses to the questions, to your resume or CV, and to the supporting confirmations or invitations. The program focuses on the impact on you and not on artistic merit. So the support material tab for mentorship projects asks for a few more items. So we ask you for a 1-page letter from the mentor confirming their participation. So this letter should include a biographical statement from the mentor indicating their experience and their qualifications to mentor you. They should address any considerations given to a culturally safe environment. They should confirm their capacity, so for example, their work schedule or other obligations that allow them to carry out the mentorship. And they should confirm their agreement to the rate of compensation. They should also describe the potential impact of the mentorship on you, as well as on them and the larger community of practice, including opportunities for reciprocal learning. And then we ask for a resume or CV from the mentor.
Now on to the Access Support tab. So if you're eligible for Access Support as an individual artist or arts and culture practitioner who self-identifies as deaf or having a disability, you could consider applying for Access Support. So these questions are asking about that. If you're requesting Access Support for your project, this can include any accessibility services, rental equipment, or support people to help you or your mentor with the project. You can choose to either submit that Access Support request while submitting your grant, that's option 1, or you can wait until you receive confirmation of funding and request support at that time instead, that's option 2. If you select option 1, the Access Support application will appear, and you'll be asked to provide descriptions of the barriers and supports or solutions for your project, as well as how much they will cost. For more information on Access Support, you can contact our main office line at 250-35-something-356 1718. That's 250-356-1718. Or you can visit the bcartscouncil.ca/accessibility. Our access coordinators will be happy to discuss what you can apply for, and they'll go through the application with you. So this is talking about the feedback tab. We're always looking for ways to improve how we communicate with the arts and culture sector in BC. This section is totally optional and it's not part of the application process, but your answers will help us improve the services that we provide. So in this tab, we ask, how did you learn about the intake for this program? And there's a drop-down menu of things that you can select from. And then in the future, how would you like to be informed about our programs? And you can select direct email or through social media or other things from the drop-down tab there. We ask if this is your first application to the BC Arts Council. It just helps to give us a sense of folks that are new that are applying versus folks that have applied in the past. We ask if you attended information sessions prior to completing your application, just to see how many folks are participating in those. Have you ever received BC Arts Council funding? And then we ask, how long did this application take you to complete? Just to give us a sense of how much time it's taking folks. And then lastly, we get to the declaration tab. And in this tab, you are confirming a few things. You're confirming and promising that you meet the eligibility criteria for this program as you understand it, and that the information that you provide is complete and true, and that you will abide by all applicable laws, and that you consent to the BC Arts Council collecting, protecting, and sharing your information in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Acts. That brings us to the end of this presentation. Thanks for your interest in the Early Career Development Program. We hope that you'll reach out with any questions you might have, and that you can follow our social media channels on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date on this and all of our programs. As we mentioned, Michelle and I co-manage the Early Career Development Program with responsibilities in specific areas. So if you have questions more related to the performing arts side of things, theater, dance, music, you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to Michelle with questions more in the studio arts side of things, media arts, visual arts, literary arts, and museums. And we're really grateful that you took the time to be with us today, and we look forward to hearing any questions that you may have. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everyone.